Welcome to The Observable Unknown, where science meets the unexplained. I'm Dr. Juan Carlos Rey of crowscupboard.com, and after 2 decades of working at the intersection of comparative religious studies, grief counseling, anthropology, quantum mechanics, and consciousness studies, I've discovered that our most profound human experiences often exist in the space between what we can prove and what we can perceive. In this podcast, we'll explore the measurable influences of immeasurable forces, those hidden factors that shape our reality but often escape our traditional scientific frameworks. From the latest research in consciousness studies to the ancient wisdom that's now finding validation in neuroscience and quantum physics, we're here to bridge the gap between academic rigor and spiritual insight. Whether you're a skeptic, a seeker, or simply curious about the deeper mechanics of human experience, you're in the right place. Together we'll examine the evidence, challenge our assumptions, and explore what happens when we dare to look beyond the obvious. Today's conversation moves us into a territory both ancient and urgently modern, the disciplined shaping of attention through breath, rhythm, and contemplative practice. My guest is Spencer Delisle, president of the Art of Living Foundation in Canada, an executive performance coach and a long-time meditation teacher, whose work bridges corporate leadership, athletic performance, and the physiology of resilience. Earlier in his career, Spencer worked within oncology and cardiology research environments. That scientific grounding, paired with decades of contemplative training, has placed him at an unusual intersection. He has spent much of his professional life asking a deceptively simple question: what happens to cognition, perception, and moral clarity when the nervous system is trained rather than merely stressed? He has worked with executives, elite athletes, and public institutions exploring how breath-regulated attention may alter decision-making, emotional endurance, and the capacity to remain psychologically present under pressure. Tonight we explore the nervous system not as an abstract concept, but as an instrument, one that can be tuned, one that can also become distorted by speed, ambition, or fear. Please join me in welcoming Spencer Delisle, and without further ado, let's join the conversation. Spencer, it's an absolute honor to be sitting with you today, and I would love to know something I've been curious about for a while. You began your career in oncology and cardiology research settings. What first persuaded you that contemplative practice could be examined with the same disciplined curiosity as physiology or pharmacology?
Thank you, Dr. Ray, and it's really a pleasure to be and an honor to be here with you. Well, I think that just by my own nature, I've been a very curious person since I was very young. My earliest memories of, breaking open my toys to see how they work at the chagrin of my parents that had spent their hard-earned money to pay for them.
Hmm.
Uh, and I think from the beginning, I always wanted to know how and why things worked, and so I had that natural tendency of curiosity. And as I moved on in my education, I found that those interests and those desires were they're really enlivened by science. And so throughout my education, very interested in work in the laboratory, as well as my studies. And then when I graduated, doing some really nice work with biotin at Mount Allison University, in terms of being able to use that as a label to identify cancers, and then later on, doing some very interesting research in nutritional biochemistry, basically studying cholesterol and looking at how we could lower people's kind of bad cholesterol, so to speak, that LDL, in a non-pharmaceutical way, so with nutrition instead. So that I felt was really interesting. And I think that to answer your question, that same mentality had me asking the bigger questions about life. What is this life? Why am I here? Am I just here to toil in the laboratory from early in the morning until late at night? Or is there something, and go and have a nice time with family and friends, and then have my dinner and then do it all over again the next day? Or is there something more to life? And I think that there was a point in my life where this continually asking this question, I had some kind of hunches and some hypotheses, but I wasn't able to really find an answer, and it was an interesting time in my life because it really got me down actually, and being that frustration with not being able to find a deeper answer, led me into learning about practices, very ancient practices. I thought that, okay, well, if I can't find an answer, then maybe those ancient civilizations from the past that had wrote about this, for so many thousands of years, perhaps there could be some wisdom there. And so really it started from, yeah, I guess more, you could say more of an intellectual approach. And then gradually my journey continued really in more of an experiential kind of activities to get me closer and closer to those answers, which I keep searching for today, and I have my own ideas, but I would say rather than a journey of frustration, it's really become a journey of joy and discovering that experience of love and peace and joy within me, is really a beautiful way to live life.
As a short aside, I'd love to hear about the arc of meditations that you've studied, starting from the most basic and probably the beginning of this conversation to where you're at now.
Sure. So I think once again, from very early on, I like spending time on my own. I guess you could say I'm a little bit more of an introvert than an extrovert,
Mhm.
and I just appreciate having time on my own. And I think from that point, from a young age, be observing my own thoughts. I grew up in the Christian tradition, so being in prayer and kind of listening for an answer to my prayers was another practice I had done in movement and throughout the day, but also I guess you could say I didn't call it meditation at that point, but just sitting after a prayer in silence. So that practice, you could say was the beginning. And then later on, I would say in university, I read an interesting book called The Tao of Physics.
Fritjof Capra, one of my favorites.
Yes, yes, exactly. So, this was a very, interesting flip on not only how I thought about physics and chemistry that I was studying, and I was reading it as a part of a physical chemistry class I had, but also the way I thought about life and kind of thinking outside of the box, and led into I guess you could say some meditation techniques that were kind of more Buddhist based, and reading more about that and then practicing as well. But I would say the vast majority of the meditation that I have done is with a grouping of meditations called automatic self-transcending meditation.
Mhm.
And really it has to do with becoming an observer, becoming a witness to everything that's within you and outside of you. And that is really for me, where I've really found, this infinite joy and ability to connect with, you could say, that unseen aspect of myself. Many people, some people may call it the self, some may call it the soul. And the way I did it was through the Art of Living Foundation has a program. It's called Sahaj Samadhi meditation. Sahaj means effortless, and Samadhi is that deepest state of your own self. And through this practice of becoming a witness, and a specific mantra that's given, you're able to really, you could say, kind of descend through those different 6 layers to the 7th layer of your existence, to the self, and really abide in that space. And I would say that is the place where I have the most experience, and the most results, actually.
That's fantastic. Now, many people approach meditation as relief from distress. You've worked extensively with individuals who are already highly functional. What changes when regulation becomes a performance variable rather than a coping mechanism?
A performance variable rather than a coping mechanism. So you're moving from a place where someone is feeling burdened and stressed, out of a trauma, and you've gotten to a healthy point where actually you're moving into a state meditative performance. Is that what you mean by your question?
That's right, using meditative practices to hone performance standards.
Wonderful. Yeah. Yeah. So that's it. I think now there's a huge body of research, demonstrating the benefits of meditation. Not just for someone that's depressed or anxious or coming out of trauma. We do a lot of work with veterans that come back from the war and are experiencing post-traumatic stress and even moral injury. They can't sleep, they can't eat. It's a horrible existence to have this kind of unseen, unspoken collateral of the war, and the results are incredible. What we've seen, being many of those veterans come to us and tell them that they feel like they got their life back, including their spouses. I feel like you gave me my husband back or my wife back. So that is really beautiful. But it's a great point because this is not just for people that are having a tough time. This is also for high performers. And if we take a similar example of the police, we do these high performance workshops for police. It's called Sky Resilience. It's done with our sister organization, the International Association for Human Values. And what we've seen is that by doing these breathing practices, we're actually able to regulate the level of cortisol in the system so that an officer's instead of reacting to a situation out of an emotion, they're able to respond instead. And that response time can be just as fast or sometimes even faster. But the result is very different. Rather than having, an emotional meltdown and doing something you regret, now the mind is in a much more calm and centered state. Emotionally, the officer is much more grounded. Obviously, that cortisol level has come down with the practice of these daily breathing techniques that we teach the officers, so that instead of having a cortisol level unmanageable and it's flooded the cerebral cortex, so even the neurons can't even communicate. That's why often in crisis situations we can make very rash actions. Now at this point, the cortisol level has reduced. There's excellent cerebral connections in the brain, and the officer can make that calm, cool, collected decision in the heat of the moment. And this is something that's not just useful on the streets of whatever city you live in, but or on the battlefield, so to speak. This is something that on the battlefields of the boardrooms is also very useful.
I can imagine.
Because yes, oftentimes, I remember working for one of my advisors who was a great researcher, great research mind, but his method of communication was screaming. And that is not always the most useful. And very high level of intellect and brilliant mind, but the emotional regulation was very immature, and that was disappointing because it limited the effectiveness he could have. And we see this in the boardroom all the time. We have another sister organization called the Transformational Leadership for Excellence Institute, and it basically does all our corporate programming. And what we've seen is that sometimes if you're in a meeting, you're meeting with your colleagues or your team, someone says something that's triggering for you, your emotion overwhelms you, and once again you make a rash decision, you make a rash action that could destroy that relationship or make it very difficult or time consuming to mend. So by doing regular and having your own regular meditation practice, this can kind of put us in the driver's seat. There are a number of neuroscience studies that look at that gap between the stimulus, our thoughts, our emotions, and those emotional hormones and chemicals that rush through the body. And they say it's 60 to 90 seconds that we have. And if you're able to kind of weather the storm, so to speak, then you're able to make that very calm and cool decision with the mind in a settled place. And that's the thing. thing, like where do the best decisions come from? Does it come from a rash, angry, bubbling with rage mind? Well, not really. It comes from a calm, settled, centered mind. And really, I would say that is what these meditation techniques bring. And what I've seen in my experience with Sahaj Samadhi meditation is that it really gives me an even keel so that no matter if things are going very well, I don't lose my focus. And if things are not going so well, I'm still able to look at the bright side, see things as they are, rather than perhaps these sunglasses of emotions would have me see them, so that I can take proper action at the proper time. And effectively, that is the definition of yoga: is skill in action. And in Sahaj Samadhi meditation, we've seen in the corporate world as well, can really give that.
Do you have a personal triage method for arresting the chemical cascade that typically gets precipitated by an emotional trigger?
Yes, that's a great question. So what can we practically do in the moment? Because the beautiful thing is that as the years go by, and I'm sure you could attest to this as well, now that surge of emotions is much less intense than it was, 5, 10, 20 years ago. It's almost like before it was like a line through concrete, and then a line through, and then it became a line through water. And then now it's almost like getting towards a line through air. Like the emotions still come, but the intensity is less, and that frequency of that rush of negative emotions is less. Now what to do when you are overcome by those emotions? You do have that surge of emotions, that emotional storm, so to speak. Well, the 3A method I find is very practical. So those A's are awareness, acceptance, and action. So the first one, awareness, typically we're not so aware in our lives. I mean, there are some exceptions, but typically we're breathing, we don't know we're breathing. We can feel a certain emotion, and because we're so overwhelmed and stressed, and we're multitasking, or you could say shifting our attention, our energy is low, and it becomes difficult to be aware. So even emotion may come up and we're not aware, and we just react. So the first step is to just simply become aware that, okay, I'm feeling this emotion. Okay, for example, there's some anxiety coming up. Perhaps I have to give a big presentation. There's a lot riding on this decision, and I want to do a good job, and I feel some anxiety. So what we know is that the mind and the body work on different laws. If you put some resistance on something, so say I put some resistance on this computer, I can push it away. But in the mind, it runs by a different law. The more you resist in the mind, a thought or an emotion, what happens? The more they persist. So, and I mean, that's our first reaction, right? Like, I mean, I think any of your listeners here would be hard pressed to say, oh, if I asked who likes to feel anxious or fearful, not so many people, actually.
Not so
No
many.
one.
Not so
Yeah,
many.
exactly. So being able to have the courage to say, okay, an emotion is like a wave in the ocean. Can a wave destroy the ocean? No.
No.
Of course not. So can an emotion destroy me? No, of course not. So by being with this feeling, by allowing myself to feel this and just being present with that emotion, giving it that attention, it will dissipate and disappear. Once we've given it that time and attention, it settles down and it moves on its way. In fact, that is the nature of an emotion. You could say it's energy in motion. And often it's like we're trying to stop the current of the emotion. No, I don't want to feel like that. No, this is not the time. Okay, this may not be the time, but this is the way it is right now. So being able to simply accept the moment as it is, have the courage to be with that emotion, you'll notice that the emotion will settle down. And then with a calm, clear mind, you can take that rational, decisive, intuitive action. So those would be a nice kind of trio that you can use in those difficult situations, the 3 A's. So awareness, acceptance, and action.
Tremendous. Thank you very much. I certainly appreciate that, and I know the listeners do as well. Breathwork is often framed in symbolic or highly spiritual language. If we translate it into neurophysiological terms, which systems are most directly influenced influenced by sustained rhythmic breathing?
Well, I would just like to keep it simple. And I would say that, meditation has an effect on our entire nervous system, brain, spinal cord, all the nerves throughout the body. And I think the biggest culprit that prevents us from being our best and from, our whole body complex from working the best is stress. And, if you think about it, if we think about just something simple like digestion, our digestive system, they say, our second brain is in the gut.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about the vagus nerve and etc. But that simple process of digestion is really an incredible symphony in and of itself. And what do we do? How are we a part of that symphony? Well, first we chew the food, we swallow the food, and then what do we do after that? Well, there's not so much to be done actually. We just let go and we let that inner intelligence of our nervous system, our digestive system, our circulatory system to do the rest. And I mean, now there's so much research demonstrating the, deleterious or the negative effects of stress on the system.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that if we're able to reduce or manage, because some stress is good too, right? Like being able, if you have absolutely zero stress in your life, then maybe you're not motivated to do anything. And that's not a good position to be in either. But having an optimized, level of stress. I remember there was a bell curve from this study from the early 1900, I believe. And there was this kind of sweet spot of stress where, you had enough stress that you were motivated and enthused, but not so much that you were, overrun or burning out. And I think being able to have a tool, as you were saying, with the breath, it can really be a powerful way to give us more control over our nervous system. Because typically the autonomic nervous system, we don't have control over it, active control anyway. And the breath can really change that for us. And instead of it being something very passive, we can take an active role in the autonomic nervous system. In one sense, if we look at the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest system, so to speak, that, how can we affect that system? Well, we know that through, for example, Ujjayi breath, which is a breathing technique that's used to soothe and calm the system, we can actually tap into that parasympathetic system and calm the system down and soothe that system and move our whole nervous system into that rest and digest mode to rejuvenate ourselves. And conversely, once I'm rejuvenated, then I'm in the perfect position to actually jump into action. And if we can stay on the rejuvenation side for a moment, talking about that Ujjayi breathing, it actually is one of the powerful ways to get in touch with the vagus nerve. And if we're able to get in touch more with the vagus nerve, that can also help to clear the cortisol from the brain and the cerebral cortex, as we were talking about earlier, enabling us to make, rather than rash decisions from the amygdala, to make more reasoned, measured decisions from the cerebral cortex. So on the rested side, if we're able to rest deeply, we automatically are able to spring into action more effectively. And on the sympathetic side, we also want to be focused in our life. We want to be inspired. We want to be dynamic. Our life as active professionals demands it. And how do we do that if our energy is low? Well, there are also breathing techniques for that. There's an incredible technique called Bastrika or bellows breath. It's a very powerful technique for activating the sympathetic nervous system. And there's actually interesting research that demonstrates not only does it raise, the level of, you could say, your own perception of the energy you have in the system, but it also raises your level of focus as well. So simply through the breath, we can have a very direct impact on both the parasympathetic and the sympathetic system. And it enables you really to change your state. So sorry for everybody out there, but we revoked your past to be eternally miserable and without energy and overrun. Yeah, sorry about that. You now have at least some clues and a little bit of a taste of where you could go and what you could do. And of course, we teach both of those techniques as some introductory techniques on the Art of Living Part 1 program.
Physiologist Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, in his study of flow, discussed exactly what you brought up earlier, a requirement of stress. But how would someone entering into CPTSD or PTSD and a meditative practice to manage their condition understand the difference between usable stress and toxic stress?
Well, I think it's a great question because when you're injured and when you're in a constant state of hypervigilance, everything seems like a threat. So, you may feel that there's a tiger at the door, but it's just your kids. It's just a bunch of little baby tigers.
Right.
But that for you is really disrupting your nervous system tremendously. So in the beginning, it's so interesting because a behavior and something that soldiers have honed so well to become vigilant, that it has actively saved their lives and saved the lives of many of their colleagues as well, and enabled them to be highly effective on the battlefield, is something that is actually tearing them apart at home. So, perhaps before being able to distinguish between these two types of stress, really we need to do, a complete healing of the nervous system and a complete rejuvenation of the nervous system, and effectively train the nervous system that it's okay to be to rest. And really, in these workshops that we do, or in the research studies that we're doing a research study at University of Toronto with Mount Sinai Hospital, looking at these tools that we teach to be used on an online format. So we're teaching the Sudarshan Kriya and accompanying techniques like Ujjayi, Bhastrika, different types of these pranayam or different breathing techniques, coupled with guided relaxation and meditation, and particularly the sky breath meditation or Sudarshan Kriya as an online solution. So there is a situation where, many veterans, because of the hypervigilance, the moral injury, and many other things, high levels of anxiety, they don't feel safe outside of their own home. So, or they may be in very rural areas, and to come to a course to learn these things is just not practical for them. So we wanted to pair the success that we've had with our in-person programs and be able to offer them in a remote scenario. And so far it's been really great, actually. We've had some great results. Dr. Abhimanyu Sood at the University of Toronto is leading this study with his colleagues. And typically what we've seen from the veterans is that they come to the course on the first day and, their head is basically on a swivel. Any little noise, even in their own environment, for that study, or say for our in-person programs, so much so that I remember one veteran was sharing with us that for the past 10 years, since he had retired from the military, he had not had more than 4 hours sleep in a night.
Oh, gosh.
So, for us, I think that, 4 hours sleep would be, we can do it every now and then, but that is the best sleep he had in 10 years. So you can imagine, how is this person even functioning? It's remarkable, the resilience. So I remember that, the first the day after actually, that we did this Sudarshan Kriya sky breath meditation, the rhythmic breathing practice that we teach, he came back and he was kind of tongue-in-cheek angry with us. And he said to us, okay, you guys are in trouble. I almost missed my dentist appointment and it's all your fault. And so he said, okay, how's that? So then he said, last night I slept 10 hours and I almost missed my dentist appointment because of you. So, to see this technique in a very short session of practice, we have a longer practice that we do in a group, and then we have a shorter practice that the participants, whether they're CEOs in the business world or whether they're veterans or police or what have you, athletes, we also work with athletes. The course is structured towards their particular situation. We have specific techniques to use in certain situations, but the Sudarshan Kriya sky breath meditation, that foundational technique, is the same. And in only a few minutes, it just completely transformed this person, to be able to see him, rested and and really happy, actually. He told us it was the first time he felt happy since his deployments. So, I think that if we're able, through the power of the breath, power of meditation, to tap into that, that ability to rejuvenate the parasympathetic, activate the sympathetic where necessary, we can get incredible results. And from a basis of rest and well-being and self-healing, from that point, once we've gotten to that point, then we can start to decipher between those different levels of stress and those different types of stress. And once again, that awareness can bring so much growth, and we can start to make much more healthy choices.
And the kind of transformation that brings about has to be remarkable. With the pranayama respiratory disciplines that you teach, have you seen these altering perception itself in patients, or primarily emotional tone and reactivity to stress?
That's a great question. Principally, I have seen principally three types of changes. One is in perception, the other is in observation, and the last one is in expression. The founder of the Art of Living, his name is Gurudev Sri Sri Ravi Shankar. He's a yogic and meditation master from India. He started this foundation, the Art of Living Foundation, now 45 years ago. This is the 45th year of the foundation, and when he shared those three things with me in the beginning, to look out for changes in perception, observation, and expression, I started to see it more than more. Perception, I think that the answer is around us, and there are so many solutions around us, but the question is, can we see that solution? Are we aware? Do we have an awareness of that solution? Are we able to perceive it in our environment? There's that old exercise where you ask someone to count how many circles there are in the room. You close your eyes and count how many circles there are in the room. I'll give you 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Open the eyes. Look at your environment, and now close the eyes and tell me how many circles you saw. So people are thinking about that, and then I ask a second question. Okay, how many squares did you see? While their eyes are closed. And typically if our focus is on one thing, we're not going to see the breadth of the possibilities that are open to us. And that is one thing that, from the pranayama, from the breathing techniques, from the meditation that's improved, is that perception of the world around us, because our awareness is higher. And when our awareness is higher, it's almost like those solutions just come to us, so much easier. Why? There could be many reasons, but one might say that a calm, clear mind is a beautiful nurturing ground for us to be able to see things as they are, rather than, as I was mentioning before, if you have rose-colored glasses on and I'm asking you the color of the wall, well, will you trust me that I say the wall is white behind me, or will you trust your own perception? And typically people will trust their own perception. So the idea is to give people these tools so that they can effectively take off these glasses of these traumas from the past, these stresses from the past, and enable them with their own experience to see how as they are. And in so doing, being able to, effectively take those blinders off and see more of what's available in the physical world, but also in terms of ideas and inspiration and creativity. So perception is one. Observation is the other one. Observation of ourselves. So typically we're not aware of our own selves, as we were discussing before. And when we start to bring in awareness to what we may be thinking, what we may be feeling in particular, there's less of a chance of that state overcoming us. Because when we give attention to those, for example, emotions, we see that they settle down. The racing mind, when we give our mind attention and we be with those thoughts, we don't try to resist them. We don't try to push them away. We just be with them. Then we see the mind settle down. In fact, I love poetry, and I'm a big fan of Rumi. I don't know if you've ever read
Yeah,
anything of
I'm
his.
very familiar with Rumi's work. A fantastic
Wonderful.
writer, yeah.
Incredible. There's a poem that I love. It's one of my favorites. It's called The Guest House. And I would recommend it for any of the listeners that are interested in learning, how to become more aware of their mind, and how to be able to settle their mind down, or be able to settle their emotions down. And And I'm paraphrasing here, but he effectively says treat those emotions and thoughts as an honored guest. And the last thing we want to do with our anger is treat it as an honored guest. I mean, we just want to
Hmm.
slam the door
Right.
and sayonara. We don't ever want to see that again, right?
Hmm.
But what he says is no, no, open the door and treat it as an honored guest, invite it in for tea, and then see how it moves on its own. And he says it much more beautifully than I said it there. I would recommend reading the poem. It's very beautiful. But it's such a beautiful metaphor for the richness and wealth in being able to observe ourselves and giving ourselves that freedom to do so. Who do you have to perform for? Do you have to be the marionette of our society, that you have to be, happy go lucky all the time? Or do you give yourself that permission to feel certain emotions and be a human being after all? This is some good questions to reflect on, and of course giving ourselves that freedom can enable us to have a higher level of observation. And the last thing I have seen, I should say, is communication and expression, really. So when I am able to see things as they are, the outer world, without my glasses of emotions and my past, when I'm able to see myself, self-reflection, see myself as I am, then we enter into that state of expression. Some people call it the zone. Other people, call it just freedom. There are many ways of talking about this state where it almost feels like I'm not the doer of these actions. They're just happening. And interestingly enough, if you speak to high performance athletes or, high level business people, or, anyone that's at a very high level in their field, if you're at a high level in your field, many of these, athletes and performers have experienced this state of being in flow or being in the zone. And it's a total moment of pure, in one state, relaxation, and also a very high level of focus, which is contradictory. Usually we're very focused and stressed and tense, or we're very relaxed and at ease and, completely unfocused. And I would say one of the other beauties of Sudarshan Kriya, and it's demonstrated even in the studies that we've done around the brain waves of the brain, as well as associated with performance, is that it puts you in a state of relaxed alertness. So your nervous system is completely relaxed, but at the same time, you're very focused and alert, which effectively allows you to let it happen. There's a great book called The Inner Game of Tennis, and the author talks about this, about how being able to be relaxed in moments of demand and performance can enable that creative, intuitive, highest level of performance that's possible. And that's what I've seen, whether it be, the athletes that we've worked with, whether that be the CEOs that have, driven their companies to more and more success, and or whether that just be, a research scientist that's looking for another level of inspiration, creativity in her or his work. The level of expression becomes almost effortless, and those are really, I would say, the three biggest gifts that I've seen through our programs in whatever domain that it's been, whether it be in the corporate world or in schools, universities, or on the sports field or the battlefield.
So, for the more reductionistic minded individuals listening, talk to me a little bit about the chemistry. I know with nasal breathing and Brahmari humming, there's an increase in nitric oxide, which of course has a naturally sedative effect. Some of these things regulate vasopressin, cortisol, adrenaline. Obviously, we're bringing the vagus nerve into alignment as well. But what are some other chemical attributes that you've recognized having a positive impact on a contemplative practice in the circles you've?
Well, I think there's a lot of different, aspects that are improved with these breathing practices. One we touched on is the stress hormone, which is cortisol, and I mean we have number of studies. We have over 100 peer-reviewed published studies which demonstrate the benefits of Sudarshan Kriya. But there's one study I know that demonstrates it's about a 57% increase or reduction rather in the level of cortisol in the system. So first of all, when you do this practice regularly, what this practice is doing is that it's actually lowering your baseline level of cortisol. So instead of, getting into a difficult situation and your baseline is here, and then all of a sudden you're up here in a very unmanageable place, well, up. With regular practice, your baseline is maybe here. And then when you jump up, you're in a much more manageable position rather than being thrown off balance and being totally overcome by this surge in cortisol and not being able, to have that neural connection and communication in the cerebral cortex. You're actually at a point where it's giving you energy and focus to do what you need to do. I think another aspect that would be interesting for our discussion would be immunity. It was only a few years ago that we were all locked up in our home and we were all concerned about this, this global virus. And what we've seen in the research is that it actually increases our immunity. I know in one study, I believe there's a 33% increase in lymphocytes in 6 weeks from their normal range. So being able to have a tool that is really enhancing your own immunity is very powerful, in the times that we're living in. I think there's a number of different variables that we could talk about. I know that if we go beyond chemicals and we talk about brain waves, we've seen that there's a dramatic increase in the beta brain waves, which are associated with focus, heightened alertness. And we've also simultaneously noticed that the body is able to be, you could say, in a very happy state, and we have these happy hormones, and we have these stress hormones, and I know that we're able to manage the lactate a lot better, and even cholesterol, going back to the research that I did in the past, we see reductions in cholesterol with no change in diet. And I know if we come back to the veterans, the interesting thing, we did measure levels in the stress hormone, cortisol, with them. And what we found is that not only, not the levels of cortisol, it's actually the levels, it was the level of cortisol. Yeah, it was the level of cortisol that they had after doing these practices, right after the course, actually maintained for 3, 6, and 12 months, whether those veterans actually did those practices or not. So it showed that these breathing practices, obviously we recommend doing them on a daily basis, but whether you do them on a daily basis or not, they're actually, they're able to have a very significant effect for the long term, just having done it those 2 times on the course.
Fantastic. So daily practice isn't required, just recommended.
Yes. Obviously we would recommend to do the practice daily. That's where you have the best results. But even if you don't, even if you just take the course that one time, Art of Living Part 1 course or a veterans course or the corporate course, those results will stay with you for an extended period of time.
I've got to tell you, I could sit and chat with you on this for many more hours. Hopefully you'll have a chance to come back in the future. But before I let you go today, I'd love to hear what your personal favorite breathing exercise is for an immediate reduction in stress.
For an immediate reduction in stress, I would say the straw breath is a wonderful technique. And I can even show it to you now if you're open to that.
Of course. Yeah, absolutely.
So the straw breath connects us with that parasympathetic system. So the rest and digest, and it calms and soothes the system. So particularly if you're feeling frustrated or angry, the straw breath can be a very powerful way to tap into that parasympathetic system. So the way you do it is you can do it standing, you can do it sitting, however you like. You breathe in through the nose with normal breath, and then you breathe out through the mouth as if you're breathing out through a straw, like so.
With lips pursed. Excellent.
With lips pursed, and you breathe out for a much longer period of time, and you breathe in for a shorter period of time. So in through the nose, out through the mouth, in a very long and extended kind of pursed lips breath until you've breathed all the air out of your lungs, and then you can repeat. And after about a few breaths, you'll notice the mind calm, the system become more stable, and particularly if you're getting triggered by a conversation at work or in your family, it can be a really great technique to settle yourself down and kind of get your mind back, so to speak.
That's an excellent, very pragmatic tip. Do you have any retreats coming up?
Yes, in fact, we have courses going on throughout the country. So if people are interested in taking our retreats or participating in our courses, it's just artofliving.org. That's in the US or in Canada. And we have beautiful centers as well. In Saint-Mathieu-du-Parc, Quebec, we have a beautiful 350-acre center. We have an Ayurvedic spa, beautiful meditation hall where we can have about 1,000 people meditating together, and beautiful natural environment. We have an incredible center in Boone, North Carolina, in the mountains of North Carolina. And then, of course, we have centers, a beautiful center in Los Angeles, California, and many local centers, as well as centers internationally in Bangalore, India, in Germany as well. So whether you're taking one at a local center in your town or at one of our national centers, we would love to welcome you and share with you some of these deeper dive techniques. And if you'd like to know more about our corporate programs, our general public programs, or any of the programs we do with veterans or in schools, please feel free to contact myself and our team, and we'd be happy to teach you some of these techniques, and happy to meet you.
Absolutely. I will include the link in the description for this episode. Tell me, are any of the courses offered remotely for individuals who live too far away from your centers?
Most definitely. Yeah, you can take the courses online or in person. If you just go to artofliving.org, you'll be able to look up a course near you. For our partner organization, for all the institutional programs with the police or with veterans, you can just tap in iahv.org or iahv.ca for the programs in Canada. And for the corporate programs, it's mindmatters.com, or you can type in tlexinstitute.com and you'll be able to get to our corporate programs.
That's excellent. Thank you so much for sitting with me today, Spencer. It's been a real delight. And as I said earlier, you are welcome to come back later. I'm sure the benefits from these practices would suit many more listeners than not.
Wonderful. And just before we leave, I'd like to take the moment to invite you, as well as all your listeners, to the World Culture Festival. Every 5 years or so, we have a grand celebration where we invite cultures from around the world to share their dance, singing, all of their narrative stories. And we have a huge celebration. The last one we had in Washington, D.C. on the Washington Mall. We had just over 1 million people attend. We had one of the largest meditations in history there. And we did the last one before that in India. We had almost 4 million people come together. And Canada has won the bid for 2027 and we'll be celebrating in Toronto. And we really hope you'll join us to meditate together and really come together for a stress-free, violence-free world.
Absolutely. And what a great time for it, to be sure.
Most definitely.
Thank you so much, Spencer. Take care of yourself, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, Dr. Ray.
Thank you. Cheers. What we have explored today is not simply relaxation, it is the architecture of steadiness. If the nervous system is perpetually driven forward by urgency, insight narrows, empathy contracts, and imagination becomes subordinate to survival. Practices such as breath-regulated attention remind us that clarity is rarely achieved through force, it is cultivated through rhythm. Conversations like this invite us to reconsider performance itself, not as relentless acceleration, but as the capacity to remain internally organized while the world becomes more complex. If today's dialogue has stirred some reflection in you, I would very much like to hear all about it. Please write to me at theobservableunknown@gmail.com or text me directly at 336-675-5836. And wherever you've listened to this conversation, your thoughtful reviews help this work reach those who are searching for language equal to their experience. If you'd like more information about Spencer's organization and projects, the link to his website is available in this episode's description. Until next time, this has been The Observable Unknown.